I'm Brianna. Standing in the family development and play center I built, I watched as Ryan, my now ex-husband, and his mistress Melissa were humiliated and left under the weight of everyone's gazes. The room gradually quieted down, and the center settled back into its familiar rhythm. But this moment of victory didn't bring me the expected elation. Instead, it was a sense of clarity that washed over me. It all started when I was a young girl. I grew up in a well-to-do family in Seattle. My father, Henry Thompson, was a shrewd businessman. He made his fortune in real estate, always sizing people up and calculating risks. I, on the other hand, was a meticulous and goal-oriented child. I would finish my homework well in advance, neatly arrange my study supplies, and ask thought-provoking questions that often stumped adults. As I reached my late 20s, I had a clear vision in mind. I wanted to open a family development and play center. I knew that there were plenty of cafes and salons around, but there was a lack of a safe and meaningful place for children to learn, play, and grow while giving parents some much-needed time to relax. One day, I sat across from my father in his luxurious home office, a slim folder lying between us on the polished mahogany table. He looked at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Brianna, are you sure this is what you want? You could go for something simpler, like a boutique or a flower shop. They're less risky and more straightforward." I had anticipated this question and had rehearsed my answer. "That's precisely the problem, Dad. These businesses are everywhere. But parents keep saying there's nowhere suitable for their kids. I've done my research." I opened the folder and slid it towards him. He glanced down, intending just a quick look, but was soon absorbed by the market analysis, safety compliance reports, staffing projections, program schedules, and quarterly financial forecasts. As he read, I explained in detail how the center would operate, how we would manage risks, and how we would ensure a steady and well-paced growth. After a while, he leaned back in his chair with a look of pride on his face. "You've really thought this through. More than most people much older than you." I replied, "I've been thinking about this since college. I studied finance not just to read balance sheets but to understand how decisions can impact different aspects, especially when children are involved." He nodded slowly. "I can help you get started. I have the connections, and I can provide the initial capital. But the work will be yours. Every success and every failure will be on your shoulders." "That's exactly what I want," I told him. When I left his office that afternoon, I didn't feel triumphant or relieved. I felt a sense of stability, knowing that I was building something that I truly believed in. Building the center was no easy feat. I was extremely picky about the location. I rejected several spaces before finding one that met my standards for safety, accessibility, and a warm, inviting atmosphere. Cost was a factor, but it was never the deciding one. Once the lease was signed, the real work began. I spent my days meeting with contractors, reviewing permits, and making sure that every renovation adhered to local regulations. I personally selected all the equipment, researching materials, weight limits, and age-appropriate designs. Every piece had a specific purpose. Hiring staff was even more challenging. I interviewed dozens of candidates, looking beyond their resumes. I wanted people with patience, attentiveness, and emotional stability. Training took weeks, and we drilled safety protocols until they became second nature. We rehearsed emergency procedures, and background checks were thorough. After all, parents were entrusting me with their precious children, and I took that responsibility very seriously. When the center finally opened, the response was overwhelming. Parents were excited, schedules filled up quickly, and waiting lists formed. In just a few months, I added new programs, extended the hours, and introduced weekend activities. A small snack bar followed, then structured learning zones, and supervised play modules for different developmental stages. The center was thriving, but the success came at a cost. I was constantly at the center, arriving before it opened and leaving long after the last child had gone home. If a staff member was sick, I covered their shift. If a parent had concerns, I listened patiently. If something broke, I took care of it. Meals became an afterthought, and sleep was scarce. My father noticed my exhaustion before I did. One evening, he came by unannounced. He watched me move around the center, efficient but clearly worn out. When I finally sat down, he studied my face in silence. "Brianna, this isn't sustainable. You're burning yourself out." I tried to brush it off. "I'm fine, Dad." But he cut me off. "No, you're not. Even the strongest systems will fail under constant strain. You need to take a real vacation, not just a weekend getaway." For the first time in months, I didn't resist. I knew he was right. I went to Miami. The moment I stepped off the plane, it felt like a different world. The air was warm and carried the scent of the ocean and sunscreen. Mornings came without alarms, and afternoons stretched out without deadlines. On the second afternoon, as I was lying on a lounge chair near the water, a voice interrupted my peaceful thoughts. "Ever tried surfing?" I lifted the brim of my hat and looked up. A man named Jake stood beside me. He was tanned, relaxed, and had a natural confidence that came from spending a lot of time outdoors. "I can barely stand upright right now," I replied with a faint smile. He laughed. "That's what everyone says. I'm Jake, and I'm a fitness and surf instructor here at the resort." His tone was light and playful, and I found myself engaging in conversation with him easily. Out of curiosity, I agreed to a surfing lesson. Jake was incredibly patient and encouraging. He guided me through the basics with steady hands and a good sense of humor. I fell into the water more than once, but I couldn't help laughing. By the end of the session, I was both exhausted and exhilarated. We met again in the following days. Between lessons, we talked about various things, from travel to work, and sometimes just about nothing. Jake listened to me intently, and I found myself opening up about how long it had been since I'd taken a real break and how responsibility had consumed my life. Jake brought spontaneity into my days. We took impromptu walks along the shore, listened to music from beachside cafes, and had long dinners that stretched into the night. I realized how little attention I had allowed myself to receive in recent years and how used I had become to being the one in control. By the end of the week, the thought of leaving Miami was heavy. I wasn't just falling in love with Jake, I was falling in love with the carefree version of myself that I became when I was with him. I returned to Seattle with sand still in my shoes, and Jake came with me. We got married quickly, much to the surprise of our friends. But for me, it felt like a clear-cut decision after years of making calculated choices. At first, things were great. Jake found a job as a fitness trainer at a local gym. The work suited him, giving him enough structure for income while preserving his sense of freedom. He came home full of energy and stories about his clients. I returned to the center with renewed focus. I expanded the programs, refined the systems, and set long-term goals. Our life together settled into an easy rhythm. We shared dinners, had calm evenings, and weekends were stress-free. However, beneath the surface calm, the balance started to shift. I continued to grow and develop the center, taking on more strategic roles and delegating tasks. I became more confident and authoritative. Jake, on the other hand, remained in his comfort zone. His workdays were much the same, and he rarely sought advancement. I initially dismissed the difference as a matter of personality. But small signs began to add up. Conversations would stall, and I often made decisions on my own. Jake would fill silences with jokes rather than meaningful discussions. Around this time, my old college friend, Lily, started visiting more frequently. She would linger in the kitchen, making casual but somewhat pointed remarks about my schedule, Jake's work, and the success of the center. "You've really built all this on your own. It must be nice to have such a stable life," she said once. Another time, she laughed and said, "If I had your opportunities, I'd have achieved even more." I smiled and brushed it off, but I didn't realize how closely she was watching Jake. One day, I noticed some changes in Jake's behavior. He started coming home late, often past our usual dinner time. When I asked, he gave easy explanations like private clients or last-minute sessions. I trusted him because I was used to irregular hours myself. But then, I found a lipstick and 2 movie tickets in his jacket pocket. My first reaction was disbelief. I tried to come up with innocent explanations, but nothing made sense. A few days later, an email with an unknown sender appeared in my inbox. It had no message, just an attachment. I opened it late at night after the center had closed. The video loaded slowly, and there was Jake, laughing and relaxed in a hotel room with a woman. The intimacy between them was undeniable. I watched the video until the end, my expression unchanged, but a heavy feeling settled in my chest. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the realization that something I had trusted had been falling apart for a long time. That's when I met Ethan. He had been coming to the center with his young son on weekends for months. He was polite and reserved, always observing the staff and the children. One morning, as I was standing behind the snack bar, lost in thought, he asked, "Is everything all right?" I automatically replied, "I'm fine." But he just waited, and the silence made me blurt out, "My husband is cheating on me." He nodded slowly, as if he had suspected it. "I'm sorry. I know how that feels. My wife left me because she couldn't handle the uncertainty of my job. I used to be a detective, working on major cases with long hours and high stakes. Now I run a private investigation firm." I realized why he was so observant. He offered to help me find out the truth, not to punish Jake but to gain clarity. I agreed, and he came up with a plan. I waited for the right moment. One evening, when the house was quiet, I told Jake that I had heard from an attorney about an inheritance from my uncle. It was an old and nearly worthless property with a huge amount of debt, including unpaid taxes and loans. Jake's expression changed immediately. He started asking questions, his tone sharp and calculating. As I explained, I could see the distance growing between us. That night, I heard him whispering on the phone in the hallway. He seemed desperate and lost. In the morning, he was a different person. He was overly polite and avoided my gaze. He offered to make coffee but hardly touched his own. I noticed how often he checked his phone and how his attention wandered when finances were mentioned. A few days later, Jake approached me with a solution. He said that if all the assets were in his name, the creditors couldn't touch me. It was just temporary, he claimed, to protect me. I played along, knowing what was coming. That afternoon, a notary came. The paperwork was extensive, and as I signed each page slowly and deliberately, Jake was impatient. After we signed, he pulled out divorce papers, saying he wanted to make things clean. I signed without a fight. When I left the house, I felt a strange sense of calm. The next morning, Jake and Lily came to the center. Jake announced that he was the owner and that he was going to sell it. But I was ready. I took the folder from him and showed him that he had signed a waiver of all marital claims to my assets. Lily was furious and blamed Jake. The staff burst into laughter as the truth became clear. Jake stood there, his authority evaporating. I told them to leave, and they did, humiliated. In the following weeks, Jake's reputation in the fitness industry took a hit. Clients stopped booking sessions, and he lost his job. I didn't watch his downfall closely. I decided that justice wasn't about punishment but about creating distance. Ethan became a part of my life. He stopped by the center during the week, and we had long conversations and shared meals. His son would run towards me when he saw me, as if I was a part of their family. 2 years passed. One day, while shopping for groceries, I heard raised voices. It was Jake and Lily, arguing. They looked worn out. Jake looked up and recognized me. I just nodded and walked away. As I pushed my cart towards my car, My phone vibrated with a message from Ethan, asking if I needed anything. I replied no and added that I would be home soon. What remained after all the chaos was clarity. I learned that true security comes from setting clear boundaries and standing by them.